Hi kids! Today, the Plucky Little Pony teaches you how to buy a house. Yay! On the Unnamed Real Estate Podcast.
Oh, the things I do for clicks. Hi, my name is Ray Dawson. This is the Unnamed Real Estate Podcast. I am the Associate Broker and Residential Sales Manager for ProStar Realty. This is episode 60. And my co-host this week is the Plucky Little Pony. Hi, Pony. Hi, Ray. So, this Plucky Little Pony is a gift from my wife. She gave me this gift as an anniversary present. It wasn't my only anniversary present, but it was one that she got me because she, like many people who know me, but especially her long-suffering wives, has heard all of my rants going back for 16 years plus now. And one of those rants, is I start going off of how I need to do a Plucky Little Pony show to explain real estate terms to people. Now, to be honest, back in the day, the Plucky Little Pony was a rant I used to do before I started meditation and becoming more self-aware and more self-centered, and I was more full of rage and anger and hatred and all that other good stuff. But now I'm a lot more calm. You can tell. I very rarely rant, and when I do, it's usually pretty epic. But back in the day, it was pretty much just random, whatever would set me off. But especially when it came to real estate. And the reason why it would come to real estate is you'd constantly see people doing some of the silliest things or focusing on the silliest things. And I used to joke that I should do a series of videos explaining to the Plucky Little Pony how to buy houses, right? Because Plucky Little Pony is not the smartest horse in the world. The concept of the Plucky Little Pony, just for some background, is something I stole from an ex-girlfriend of mine in Salt Lake. The wife did not know that, which is probably why she bought me a Plucky Little Pony puppet. But my ex-girlfriend back in the day, she was one of those dark, gothy, emo chicks, right? My style. And her big thing was we both worked at the same company, which is active in this valley and will not be named. All right. We used to call it Fatco. You can figure it out from there. Anyways, working at Fatco was early on quite the little slog. We used to have these random firing events every beginning of every month. Really? They just fire you? Yes, Plucky. They would just can your ass at the beginning of each month if the last month's numbers dropped. Orders go down 10%, lose 10% of the staff. Whoa! What an up! Okay, don't swear. Don't swear. So, anyways, she had the idea to make a children's book, all right? And the children's book was going to be The Plucky Little Pony. And the Plucky Little Pony, I like this so far. Wait for it, it's getting dark. The Plucky Little Pony, all right, lived in a traveling circus. Yay, I like circuses. But wait, and his job was to walk in circles all day long, giving kids rides. I like children. That's because you don't have any. All right. And the Plucky Little Pony would get up in his little harness and stuff, and the kids would get on his back, and some kids were heavier, and some kids were lighter, and some kids were nice to him. Yay! Some kids were mean to him and would kick him in his side with their feet, going, "Giddy up, pony!" I don't like this very much. But there was also the nice kids. So you got to take the good with the bad? Sometimes. All right, so the Plucky Little Pony here would be walking around every day, and he did this for years and years and years. Rain, sleet, snow, and then they would pack up and they'd go to another town, and he'd walk around in circles with kids on his back. Some fat ones, some skinny ones, some nice ones, and some would kick him in the side. And he did this year over year over year, until one day, the Plucky Little Pony wasn't a plucky pony anymore. He was an old, used-up horse. And one day, a truck came for the Plucky Little Pony. And on the side of that truck, there was a word. It was a 4-letter word. But he didn't know how to read. And he doesn't know what GLUE spells.
So what does it spell?
You don't want to know.
No, I really do.
No, you really don't. Some things are not meant to be known. And one day, that plucky little pony walked into that truck and drove away. The end. So that's the background story of the plucky little pony. So I stole the idea of the plucky little pony, and I wanted to sit there and explain, things to people, what we call Barney style now. Some of the really basics, like, why do I have to have money to buy a house? Because people want money to give you a house. That kind of stuff. So here's a plucky little pony. This is showing up in a distinct location in my cubicle. So he can remind me of being in traces at that particular little circus in those little particular gray cubes at that company, walking around in circles until one day I said, screw this, and I broke my restraints and I ran off into the sunset, and I never went into the GLUE truck. I hope you learned something from this story. That's what stories are supposed to do. So, interesting numbers this week and everything like that. I just got them worked up. We're going to be going through those in a second. Let me bounce over to that real quick, and then we'll come back with a little bit of history after that. Thanks. All right, the numbers for March 23rd, 2022. Actives this week are 4,386, which is up 54 from the week prior. Our new listings are at 2,315, down 51. Pendings are at 2,043, down 31 from the week before. Under contracts, but they're looking for a backup, is 1,086, down 27. Contracts with the buyer contingency are at 80 and up 3. Closings last week were 2,180, down 192 from the week prior, and coming soon to an MLS near you are 1,051. So with these numbers being said, I want to call out that our actives have gone up this week for the first time this year, and as we've been seeing it drop down consistently. And looking at the history of how this works, today is March 23rd when I record this. It'll be March 24th when you watch it, and it goes live at 5 o'clock. All right. Back when I first started taking numbers, all right, it was the 16th of March 2020, and we were at 10,933 active listings on the MLS. We also went right into the middle of COVID craziness right then. This is where you saw a lot of the iBuyers break contracts, pay out earnest money, and just walk away from the deals. We had a whole bunch of buyers who, because they were concerned with COVID right then, did not necessarily want to get back, get into a house. They wanted to hunker down. And so that was a big spike in the market. Between 16th of March and the 14th of April, we went up 24% in how many listings we had to 14,643. And that's the highest number we've seen in 2 years. They started working their way down to where we meet the bottom of the market, which on the 24th of March 2021, we had my lowest recorded number of 3,938, which is down. And then it starts working its way back up and almost doubles to 7,550 at the peak of listings on market in October. A lot of that was seasonality, but a lot of it is also the impact of the sudden rush of buyers that we had come into the market. When we're sitting at a peak with 14,000, we are still under where we should be for the amount of people that we have, right? Everybody's always been saying that the MLS should be sitting there right around 20,000, 21,000. I've heard some people argue 25,000 listings on the market. All right. But coming up to 14,000, that was a huge, huge jump. Now, you might remember a number that, or a term that I used a lot back in the day. It was called the forbearance people out there. Those were the people who had to put their houses under forbearance because they lost their jobs during the COVID craziness or whatever reason, so they were deferring making their payments. And there was a lot of conversation going on that people were afraid all those houses were suddenly going into foreclosure. In fact, just this week, a client sent me an article, where they were mentioning, the forbearances are out there, they're starting to show up. That was an instant flag for me that article that was written this week was using data that was at least 6 months old. right? But it's still concern of certain reporters who are getting an assignment from their boss to write an article really, really quick on something they know little or nothing about. So not concerned about a forbearance hit coming in. Now, we are currently, as of today when I ran these numbers, 4,386. All right. That was 4,400 last night when I was working over the numbers with a client. And that just goes to show you why you have to pick a set time and take a snapshot consistently, right? I try to run these numbers 9 o'clock Wednesday morning, right? And of those, that 44 to 386 that we have in a day, some of those houses last night were already under contract. Their agents just hadn't updated the MLS yet. So that's why we use a consistent date, and that's why I do it Wednesday morning, because I think that's probably the best data with the least amount of noise to signal ratio. So we're going into our seasonal spring run-up of houses. All right. The buyers are showing up there. They usually show up a little bit earlier, but this is when things start backing out. So I wanted really to mention the new news in the real estate market, right? And you'll probably see a couple articles about this out there. But the interest rates are spiking. They're spiking in a real serious way. Now, for those of you who remember this, back in the first week of the year, I made my line of predictions. Right. And I could sit there and do that. Hey, nobody knew Putin was going to roll into Ukraine like he did and upset everybody's financial apple carts and whatnot. But I made the projection that interest rates could go up to 4%. Right. I based that off a lot of articles that was mostly basing what they thought the rates were going up because, the Fed was going to come in and start raising their prime lending rate to try to make up for the issues that we're having with inflation. Because remember, kids, you can't necessarily loan money or, cheaper than its inflation. The money that you get paid back is literally not worth what you went loaned out. So the interest rates tend to track the 10-year bond market. And the 10-year bond market is also, really sort of spiking. So last night, after I got done talking to my client, I called the lender back, or his lender, who had called me earlier on in the day. And he told me that he was just seeing the number as, I want to say it was 4.875. Right. So that's that is more than 3/4 of a point above what I originally quoted, saying that we are going to hit 4. Right. We started this year down at like 302. Right. And now we're kicking it back up. So as these interest rates go up, you're going to see a lot of buyers out there who are not going to be able to afford the houses that they want. Right. And for every point increase we get, we have more and more buyers who are just going to get priced out of the market. Now, if you remember from last week, our Cromford report numbers for buyers was at 112, which is still above normal. The normal range is between 90 and 110, so it's just above normal. We have just a bit more buyers out there looking for houses than normal. Right? These interest rates going up are going to knock that down. We're going to have maybe a normal buyer market here very shortly. And what I mean by normal buyer market, I mean normal amount of buyers. Right? But we still have our inventory problem. All right. The second number on that whole thing was 24 is our sales Cromford numbers. Right. Same rate. We should be somewhere between 90 and 110 to be considered that being normal. Right. So what are we going to see happening soon? We're going to be seeing less buyers out there on the streets. Right? A whole bunch of people just had to shift their purchasing out of the neighborhoods that they want into neighborhoods that wasn't their first pick to live in. Right? And that is because even though you could buy a $500,000 house last week, this week, all right, and the next week, you're not going to qualify for a $500,000 loan anymore, or you'll still qualify for it, but your monthly payment's going to be more than you thought it was going to be, right? And you're going to start getting a monthly payment that's going to make you uncomfortable. So we're going to see demand starting to diminish here. That is still not the driver of our rates right now, of our growth. The driver of our growth is that 24 number. We don't have enough housing to house the people that we have coming in to Phoenix. Remember, we're still going on 200 people a day. All right. In the course of watching this video, depending on how much longer it goes, all right, just realize people have shown up in the course of you watching this video. They have moved. They've crested over the mountains in that U-Haul. Right. They're coming into the Valley of the Sun, and they're going to be looking for a place to live. All right. And we have not built a house. A house has not been completed in this time frame. Right. So, what does this mean for upcoming numbers? I'm going to try to get a lot more information going on this because this is one of those real-time situations that are happening on the fly. And in the course of me starting recording this whole thing with the pony and to now, who knows what's dropped. I don't know. The rates are fluctuating that much. So keep in tune, keep watching, subscribe below and everything like that. You might even want to hit that little bell to get the alert. But of course, I drop this thing every Thursday night at 5 o'clock, and I do that specifically so if you are going out there looking at houses on the weekend, you have an understanding of what the market is that you are walking into. So after this, let's talk some history. All right, let's go on with our history. When we last week, when we just finished up, we were talking about the Pueblo Revolt, and that was the revolt of the Pueblo people, tribes against the Spanish in New Mexico. It influenced Arizona by allowing the Hopi to overrun their missions that were in their areas and kick the Spanish out of the northern part of the state. During the course of this time, it's interesting when you look at the history. There's a lot of stuff going up in the northern part of the state, and that's because of the Spanish colonists, colonialists, whatever you want to call them, coming in up the Rio Grande and through the northern part of New Mexico. At this time, we're going to start seeing Spanish influences start creeping up from the south. Now, I noticed that a lot of these exploration periods and a lot of these settlement periods are following the rivers. And, if you're in Arizona, you pretty much can figure that out. Other thing you got to remember that in much of the West, there was an entirely different ecosystem around the rivers. You would have these dense cottonwood forests that were built up because of the rivers. And a really good example of this is if you go out by Wickenburg. There's a reserve out there, and it's an example of cottonwood forest. Great little park, great for hiking, and if I'd done my research properly, I've been able to rattle that off the top of my head. But definitely check that out. I'll find it and put it in the show notes below. So in this time period, you're going to start getting Spanish coming up from the south. Now, throughout the course of the next 100 years or so, as we cover history, you are going to have a series of raids, counter-raids, punitive expeditions, all sorts of stuff between the Spanish and the Apache tribe. And the Apaches came into Arizona from Texas. Right? And they came into Arizona through Texas because they had been pushed out of Texas by the Comanche. And when you study history, a whole lot of history is people getting dispossessed by one tribe and then pushing themselves into another tribe and pushing those people out into another tribe and so on and so on and so forth. So that's why the Gaelic peoples can have a really good claim to most of Europe, right? Because the Gaelic tribes were all over Northern Europe. A lot of people, when they think of Northern Europe and Europe in general, they're always thinking the Saxons and whatnot, and the Germanic tribes and in the forests and whatnot, knocking off Roman legions by the score. But they had been pushed. Those Germans had pushed out Gaelic tribes into France. In fact, it was the Gauls who ransacked Rome back when Rome was just a republic, and that was pretty much the reason why Julius Caesar was explaining, hey, this is why we need to go beat up the Gauls. Not just because I think it's going to be cool and it'll help my political career, but Rome had, within a decent amount of time, been sacked by the Gauls before. And so what they were considering is they're pushing back the barbarians farther away from Rome. So, and as you see these tribes bouncing from one end to the other, okay, we now have the Apache living in the southwest area. And the Apaches used to be classic following the buffalo Great Plains Indian tribe. Now they've been pushed out in the desert, and because of the ecology of the desert, you really don't have the readily accessible food, and so now you're dealing with, where are we going to get food? Hey, let's go get it from those guys. They got a lot. When they decided to go get it from those guys happened to be Spanish ranchers. So let's kick into the history of the timeline here. And I cheated. I just grabbed a timeline off and posted it out. But in 1687, we got a Jesuit priest named Aquino. He's going to come in and establish some missions along the Tohono O'odham people along the Santa Cruz River. All right, he establishes and explores, and he discovers in 1694 the ruins of Casa Grande. If you've never been to the Casa Grande ruins, it's almost worth a day trip. I mean, you're going to go down there and you're going to basically see a big pile of mud. But, that is one of the oldest buildings in Arizona, if not the oldest. All right. So during the last part of the 1600s, we're both, mostly it's just exploration going on and establishing those missions with those Jesuits, getting in a position, preaching the gospel and whatnot. Then it's interesting. In 1732, okay, we're going to have a mission established near Tucson, and Tucson, if you think of it, especially the lands that were wound up being purchased under the Gaddison Purchase, was really where a lot of the settlement, a lot of ranching was going to. I hunt down in that area, and I can completely see that is great cattle grazing territory. So you find some silver is discovered in 1736. This is actually the foundation of the name Arizona. It was the name of the guy's ranch that they found the silver on. All right, and Arizona meant the good oak tree. Who knew that? Now you do. There was a Indian rebellion. The O'odham people rebelled against the Spanish in 1751. Don't have any details on that. And then, in response to that rebellion and other pressures, the Spanish established a presidio. Now, a presidio is a Spanish word for basically a fort. So, when you have places are called Fort whatever, all right, and they give the name to the town, you'll see these things, presidios. It's the same concept, except it's the Spanish version of what you consider a classical fort from watching your cowboy shows and whatnot. But they established that at a place called Tubac, which is down to the south. Tubac today is an artist colony. It still exists. But it was actually abandoned there for a period of time after the Civil War. It's really interesting. A lot of people don't know this, and just going off on a tangent here. If you live in Arizona, you are actually living in part of the Confederacy during the Civil War. A lot of people don't realize that the territory of New Mexico and Arizona, when the Civil War kicked off, as I heard it, and I haven't researched this myself, but the story I heard was because we had these Apaches running around and killing everybody and taking their cattle and whatnot, there was U.S. soldiers who were stationed here to keep an eye on the Apaches and protect Americans who were living here in the time period. When the Civil War kicked off, all those troops got recalled. All right, they're all going to go back east to fight the good fight, and it left the territory, undefended. So they sent messages off to to Washington D.C. going, hey, what about us? And D.C. basically told them, you're on your own. And so those same people went down to Richmond and talked to the Confederates and say, hey, if you'll protect us, we'll join you. And in response, the Confederacy promised to help support and defend Arizona. And I don't think they actually sent any troops, but they didn't send weapons out. And so you had Arizona and the New Mexico area basically become, they started singing Dixie and saying, we're the Confederacy now. In Tubac in particular, there was a battle that was fought in 1861 where the Apaches, with some reports of being helped by the local Mexican populace, attacked the American settlers in there and was fought off by the Confederate militia. And the Confederate militia there was able to withdraw the civilian populace to a safe location. And then the Tubac was basically raided. And then the U.S. forces coming in from California then eventually came through to Tubac, established a garrison there, and then moved on for the rest of their campaign. So, little side history of Tubac. Other than that, it's Tubac. Right, not a lot goes on down there. There's a couple more missions are established. Right, in 1868, Arizona becomes part of the Provincia de las Californias under Spanish rule. Okay, the Arizona area is actually being lumped into a specific political area. And like I said, most earlier episodes, most of us were considered part of California's. Right, and part of us was called part of Alta. So we should get to southern Arizona, and we're all the way up to 1775. And we know what's kicking off next year from our own history books, right? But there's a lot of stuff going on in the West, right outside of the American Revolution, because southern Arizona gets explored even more, right? And I actually wrote this name down twice, and I should have just wrote it down once. In 1776, a military outpost is established, right, relocating the Presidio of Tubac. They removed that fort over to Tucson, right, and they established Tucson. And that is actually done by a guy by the, he has the Spanish name of Hugo O'Connor, right? His Irish name is Hugh O'Connor, right? So, rabbit hole. Hugh O'Connor was one of the first Irish settlers into Arizona. Right? Why my good friends down at the Irish Cultural Center has never let that information known to Ray is beyond me. Right? But one of the founding father of Tucson was an Irishman. He was born in Dublin. He went to Spain, right, as a lot of Irish did at the time, and worked for the Spain, actually got himself a commission. He was a colonel of infantry. He was sent to the New World, and he was kicking ass for the Spanish king. Right? He established Tucson. He eventually wound up falling ill, moved to the Yucatan Peninsula, and died there. All right, so I assume that's where his bones were at. But yeah, great Irishman of Arizona history right there. And then things start getting really weird because, and I'm just being really weird by interesting for some of us who like history. The establishment of Tucson and the Tucson Presidio became like a focal point for Apache raids. Now, they have the most glorious names of the Battle of Tucson, the first Battle of Tucson, the second Battle of Tucson. It sounds like these really huge battles. But when you read the history of it, most of the time these battles are consisting of 200 Apache Indians coming down and raiding the cattle, being defended by 15 troopers and one poor second lieutenant. Right. The first Battle of Tucson was exactly that. There was 15 Spanish soldiers with one, they used the term ensign in the Spanish, except with a Spanish accent, which translates to Second Lieutenant Snuffy. All right, so Second Lieutenant Snuffy and his 15 hard chargers fight off during the course of time 200 Apache Indians who eventually wind up raiding their horses and running off with their cattle. Right. This becomes a sort of a reoccurring thing. The Yuma Indians, there is a massacre of Spanish settlers and missionaries in 1781. All right. In 1782, we have the Second Battle of Tucson, also a cattle raid. December 25th of the same year, we have the Third Battle of Tucson, another cattle raid. All right. And then we have, 1784, March 21st is a Fourth Battle of Tucson, Sonora, and New Spain. And these are Apache raids, raiding for cattle, burning out ranches. It's a continual raiding for the Apaches. Or once again, remember, they have been displaced from their traditional lands. Right, living a hardscrabble life out in the desert, and they're literally having to raid everybody around them, right, including historically the Pueblo, the Navajo. They're just doing it to everybody, all right, with this series of raids. This is an important thing to note, right? The Apache raids and being protected from the Apache has downstream historical impact. All right, I've already mentioned the Civil War. All right. Arizona and New Mexico did not join the Confederacy for slavery and states' rights. They joined the first people who said, yeah, we'll do something to protect you. And what they needed protection from was the Apache, and the Apache who was raiding all the settlements and villages. So, after the time period of these Apache raids, and we have multiple other wars, literally called the Apache Mexican Wars. All right, these fall into the Apache Spanish Wars. Right, there is an American Apache War. Right, certain U.S. Army regiments still have battle streamers on their colors that say Apache War on it. All right. And I almost wonder if you can even take that even further, because I'm seeing some of these fights saying that there was battles going on between the Mexican government and the Apache back to 1910. All right, that's the same time Pancho Villa's running around. So it'd be interesting to keep track on that. So 1789, we have one of the first Spanish land grants, which is bestowed to Toribio de Otero. It's a 63-acre ranch, which remained in the family until 1941. It's really a shame they got rid of that. Spanish land grants were really interesting. That was actually the Spanish king is literally granting an individual person a chunk of land. I've heard tell that there's still some Spanish land grants in New Mexico that are owned by the original families who got the land grant from the Spanish king in this time period. I also heard that for some reason, because of the way that those Spanish land grants were granted, they're untaxable by the local community. So you can have a huge plot of land and don't have to pay property taxes on it. Go team. So, and then in 1804, the Spanish province of Las Californias is split, and Arizona becomes part of the new province of Alta California. So this wraps up to 1804. This is the last of the time period of New Spain. This is the last of the time period of, when I'm talking the European colonials, the European powers involved in this is the last time we're going to see Spain, because next week we're going to get into the Mexican Revolution. And just to highlight on what's going to happen is that the Mexican Revolution is inspired by the American Revolution, but has a very distinct Mexican flair. We could almost say it's a little more caliente. Right, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to wrap up on that next week, Mexican Revolution, and then we're probably going to have to describe the Mexican Civil War, which happens before we even get to the original reason why I wanted to start this whole thing off in, the Mexican-American War. So as we move along, all things considered, that's the end of this week. I was able to get my videotapes, this all recorded up on Wednesday and whatnot, so I can have it out on Thursday. I want you guys to have a great weekend. I'm going to try to get a second videos popping up on Tuesdays. So it's going to be a lot less news and gossip and Ray running off at the mouth, and more very specific 5 minutes on this, 5 minutes on that. I'm just trying to find a time in my schedule where I can start doing those things. I might have to start recording those things from home on the weekends or something, or maybe I'll just sit down and do a batch recording and let it out in dribs and drabs. That'll be safe. Be safe out there. Have a great weekend. Keep your eye on the news. Work your sphere of influence. And have a great weekend. Talk to you guys later.